Welcome to the podcast, The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry, a consultant, a coach, and a serial entrepreneur. The mission here is to teach, inspire, and to motivate. The guest that we're talking to today is Miss Monique B. Jones. She is the president and CEO of Forefront. About how non-for-profits, and particularly how the organization she is leading, Forefront, is disrupting the nonprofit world and how they are really revolutionizing Illinois. Like I do in all of my podcasts, I like to give a little bit of history to level set us so that you can really appreciate the world in which she is operating in. Non-for-profits, I do a little bit of research. And so I just want to take a few minutes to kind of explain to you non-for-profits in the U.S. So that there's a little bit of understanding where I'm coming from and what I found in my research. Nonprofits exist in the United States for several reasons. Their creation is rooted in the country's social, economic, and historical context. And in my research, I found seven real good reasons why non-for-profits have been created. The first one is addressing social needs. Nonprofits were created to address needs and issues that neither the government nor the private sector were adequately addressing. These areas include education, health, social services, art, culture. Non-for-profits have often emerged to fill the gaps in public service in very unique and innovative ways. And I'm sure Monique can talk a little bit about that. The second one is promoting civic engagement. Nonprofits provide a way for individuals and groups to organize around common interests, causes, and concerns. They offer platforms for civic engagement, allowing citizens to make a difference in their community. The third one, advancing a specific cause. Many non-for-profits are founded to support specific issues such as environmental conservation, human rights, animal welfare, water, disease research. These organizations rally resources and public support around their specific issue. Just a couple more. There's a historical and cultural tradition. The early days of the United States is littered with associations and charitable organizations that provide a mutual aid and address community concerns. Now, the government helped because there's a legal and there's a tax issue here. The U.S. legal system provides a framework to establish a non-for-profit, and the IRS, we've heard of the 501c3s, offer exempt status to non-for-profits so that they can apply the taxes that they would pay to their operations. Then there's diversifying. Number 6 is diversifying solutions and innovation. Non-for-profits are some of the most innovative organizations because they're addressing real needs. And I'm really excited to talk to Monique about this because, we've seen it in the pandemic. We've seen it with immigration. There's so many things that are bubbling up, and these organizations have folks who can really diversify solutions and innovate. And then the last one is enhance social welfare. By focusing on public good rather than profit, non-for-profits play a critical role in enhancing social welfare and improving the organization and reaching those that are underserved or marginalized. Now, the organization that she leads, I told you, is Forefront. Let me just take 30-second and tell you a little bit about this organization. And Monique, if I get it wrong, please correct me. Forefront is an Illinois-based statewide association representing, check this out, grant makers, non-for-profits, their advisors, and allies. Their mission is to build a vibrant social impact sector for all the folks in Illinois. Now, I think it's a pretty complex organization in what she's leading, and they have 1,100 members, and they're non-for-profit members working in 26 different issues across the state. 26, not just one. Mm-hmm. But 26. They have grant makers that come from private foundations, public charities, corporations, donor-advised funds, charitable trusts, and individuals. You talk about having everybody at the party. She does. So that's what she does. So let me introduce you to Monique B. Jones. She is a visionary leader with an extensive background in mental health, violence prevention, philanthropy, gender, racial equity, with over 20 years of experience in her career, with civic interests that spans intersection where the lives of most the vulnerable fall victim to structural oppression and inequity. I've known Monique for a minute, and Monique, I just want to say welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you. You make me sound so wonderful and so seasoned, and I feel like I'm just turned 21. So thank you. It's great to be here. Great
Well,
to be
thank
here.
you, thank you for coming. So, as we get into this, tell the listening audience a little bit about who Monique B. Jones is. That's
Oh my
my
gosh, you just did it. Monique is right now. Monique is a mother at home with a child that got out of school because of the snow. But you said it in the bio. I live a life where everything sort of blends.
okay.
I'm clinician by training. I became a social worker, heart for children. And so that's where I started my career. And then I took that to public health where the violence prevention came in, and now into philanthropy and nonprofit space. So I am a blend of all things that impacted me as I was growing up. And now I'm able to flip that and work with a lot of great people throughout the community so they can impact this world and we can all leave it better than we found it, quite honestly.
That's pretty important. I don't know if people are listening. You're living your true self, and I think a whole lot of people are walking around here depressed. They feel out of
Mm-hmm.
touch. They're disheveled. They have a high paying job, low paying job. They feel invisible because they don't feel like they're living their truth. And boy, what a blessing to live who you are.
I wish I had discovered this about myself at 21. Unfortunately, you go through some things to get
Yeah.
you there, and it is a blessing, and it's a process of recognizing what your true values are and how you
hmm
want to live those values like daily.
hmm
And thanks to you, quite honestly, and some folks on the board that served with you in my previous job, I was able to hone in on that better. And with each leadership position I've gotten, I've been able to be better at it because I've done it in partnership with my colleagues and my sponsors and my mentors throughout my career.
Well, let me ask that because I'm curious. Because
Mhm.
then we'll get in the forefront. You know,
Okay.
I would say that you are a great. I've seen you connect with people. It seems to be part of your nature. You don't stumble over yourself in the room full of people. So where you are in your life now, is it intentional? Is it how would you say? Is it intentional, or did it just happen? We just get lucky.
Lucky? No. Blessed? Yes. If
Okay.
you could have asked me 10 years ago if this where I would have been, absolutely not. However, I made a commitment to God and to myself as a teenager. And this is the spiritual part of me to be the vessel that God can use.
Okay.
And literally, what that means is God tells me what I can do. And what you see, and hopefully what everybody sees, is not Monique, but the values, the morals, the ethics that come
Mhm.
through in someone who wants to do good in this world. So give God the glory, give, my family the glory, because you're gonna get it all when you get me. Um, but I got here by people seeing who I could be
Mhm.
and really instilling that in me. And you get rid of your imposter syndrome slowly melts away when you can walk into a room and be your authentic self. And for me to do that and not, I won't say I don't care, but to not first prioritize what other people think about me, but prioritize the vessel that I am and how I'm able to use it. That's literally how I walk around
Y
daily.
that's really important because I think the world that you play in is, it requires a lot of finesse, and here's my perspective. You know, forefront non-for-profits, like I just said in my piece, are dealing with some things that the private sector and government aren't dealing with.
Correct.
Immigration now, the pandemic,
Hmm.
vaccines, healthcare, these things are real. People, and so you're talking with people who are hurting, who want some help. You're talking with folks who have a vision of solving their issue, the non for profits. And then you got the people with the money who want to do good, and they recognize they can't fund everything. And so how do you and so I just think it's important to walk in and be yourself because you can't please all those people, or can you?
You cannot. You absolutely cannot, and you get into trouble when you try.
Okay.
So the most important thing, so Forefront is this is our 50th anniversary year. You'll hear more about that coming through the year. I've only been here for 3 of those 50 years, and
Okay.
our identity has changed 3 times. So
Oh
we
wow.
came in as Donors Forum of Chicago, only focused on our grant making community. We took away the of Chicago part and was Donors Forum, where we would think about ourselves throughout the entire state. And just about 10 years ago, we switched our branding. My predecessor, Eric Weinheimer, changed our name to Forefront, which I appreciate because I get to ding everyone when they say on the forefront. Um, but the idea of being an organization that desires to work throughout the state with both our grant makers and our nonprofit organizations, we get right in the middle of those worlds to help them connect better. Not that they don't want to connect, but you know this, everyone knows this. When you go back to your individual organizations with your own strategic plans, your own missions, your own goals, the ability and the time that it takes to actually connect with your community prior to doing all that is a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
And so our job is to foster opportunities to do that. That doesn't always make it an agreeable room when we're
Oh, I
talking
bet
about
not.
how right when we're talking about need versus ability to fund. Clearly our philanthropic partners cannot make up for what our government lacks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Neither can our nonprofit organizations. We can't fill the gaps. We can't solve immigration. We can't make up for poor policy. And so being able to be together with everyone in the room who can have a say so and who should have a say so is important to us. And so we build those tables and we maintain those tables all the time.
And so what's the funnest part of being in the room? Because the next question is going to be what's the most frustrating. um
The funnest part, the funnest part is, Keith, I get to see people's minds working um, very thoughtfully. So you can tell when someone's brain is churning, when they're figuring out how to connect with each other. And then ultimately, when this idea springs that they didn't know was like in the belly of the beast.
right.
And it's
Right.
so fun to bring to life and tell people this all the time. We make the rules, we make the policies, we make the things that we've been following. And guess what? We can change them.
Wow. Okay. 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 Yeah. That that
We
is
can
that
change them.
that
There's
is
no
fun.
there's no book that says this has to go this way or we're gonna all disintegrate.
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
our methodologies and make it better according to the life that we're living right now.
Okay. And so, I'm going to ask what's the most frustrating part? That you can't fund
The most
everything?
frustrating part. No, the most frustrating part is actually is people who think they can't change.
Oh,
Um,
please tell me
the
more.
last the last dying words of any organization is we've always done it that way.
Yes.
I forget whose quote that is, but I use it often. Is we've always done it that way, and we kick ourselves in the butt every time. So it's frustrating to be either in rooms with folks, with our legislators, with my colleagues, who say, "Well, this is the way to do it, and this is what works." Well, give me some data that says that's what's been working. Tell me exactly how that's
Hmm.
working. My aunt, my aunt, I love her so. She is a nurse, and she's solid about her nursing. She has a magnet that she leaves with people that says that is not an option. And her key to life is you have to know what is not an option and what your other options are. Like, what's the solid stuff that can't change and what can change, and how you can be a force to change the things that can't.
Got it. Got it. I love that. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Now, I'm not going to say I
what,
don't leave places. Sorry.
no, please.
I'm not going to say I don't leave places very, very frustrated. I do. But I take it in stride with knowing what my role is and what I can accomplish.
No, I understand. I understand. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'll let you keep the frustration part, because this is not for the podcast part of this. Because
Got you.
heavy is the head that wears the crown, and many people don't understand that. So I want to turn now to, we were in a pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and we're coming out of pandemic. We have vaccine issues. We have education issues. We have workforce issues where people remote work from home issues, and now we have immigration issues.
Mm-hmm.
Forefront, would you say that you guys are on the forefront of the issues? Do people bring those issues to you guys? Like, we have busing issues coming in Chicago, because it's not just Chicago, it's all the suburbs now. So talk a little bit about how you guys pick the issues that you want to play in.
So thank you for that. And it is a very important issue, and no resolve to it anytime soon, but we don't pick our issues. Every year, probably twice a year, we release a survey to our members. And we want the questions on that survey center around what's important to them as they lead their organization. Like, what organizational issues are you dealing with? Budgeting, new board members, retention of board members, funding. The other part of that is what issues outward facing in the community are most impacting your work. And so then we gather that information. We call it a sector snapshot. We present it back to the community, and we build programming around that. For issues such as immigration, new arrivals, we do ask our partners who are working in that, what could they better use? The number one answer typically is collaboration and communication. So if we have nonprofit organizations working in the space, clearly they want to be able to do it better, as best as they can. And we want that for them. The key to that is more funding. And so you think about hosting funders briefings so that we're clear with our funders what the issue is, what we're responsible or can be responsible for funding, what our government should be taking care of. But, let's be real, they're not. What policy looks like. So our space in issues like that is funding, direct service work, policy. How are we tackling it in those different ways? And we have committees that work on those throughout the year. Legislative session is, just about to gear up. So there are I'm sure, some policy things on the table. Our role at Forefront is to make sure the voices of our members are heard before those
Ooh.
pieces of policies are brought forward, voted on, discussed. Make sure you go to our website to sign up for our public policy listserv so that you know what's coming up and what your voice can be used on.
And we're talking about policies that get enacted at the city of Chicago or down in Springfield, correct?
And federal, yes.
Oh, okay. Which is, I didn't consider that part. Wow, you guys are helping to set policy. Is it, I want to believe that all public servants want to do good. That's where my mentality is. And so when the pandemic happened, let's take it in like a piece of pie. Tell me from where you sit. I want to believe that the members, because you have members, non-for-profits, we know they changed. They probably panicked a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the grant makers, the folks with the money. A lot of them went on pause, or did they? How would you say the pre and post pandemic philosophies have changed?
What do you mean went on pause?
Well, some of them stopped granting funds until they knew what they were going to fund, or did they not?
I don't recall that. So my
I could be wrong.
my views
Please
in the
educate.
Two different spaces. So when the pandemic hit, I was leading the Evanston Community Foundation, where we led more increased fundraising and a larger release of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And I believe my colleague Saul over there is continuing to make sure that those dollars are getting out of the door. Um, and that is where the majority of our grant making partners did. They released lots of restrictions. They increased their payout beyond the 5%. They really looked at how to get funding on the ground quicker.
Got it.
The not the problem. The challenge with that is it happened so quickly. It happened in a way that was very responsive to the community, but it's not the normal way for processes to happen. And so now what I see are colleagues really thinking about how to make the biggest impact they can so that, forbid another, crisis such as this comes, how are they able to go back and move quickly? When I got over to Forefront, which was part of my reason for transitioning, I could see the larger space. We were
Hmm.
missing the connection throughout the state.
Ah,
It took the state of Illinois, gratefully with the help of some of our colleagues like Sharon Bush, at the time Helene Gale at CCT, to see that we needed to move quicker. And then the folks who were on the ground in our rural communities or throughout outside of Chicago, it took us a longer time to get to them. And the typical processes that we were using to make grants did not work for those communities. So our
yeah,
undocumented friends, folks who were off the radar and were already susceptible to oppression were hit worse. We fell deeper,
I
we
see.
fell
I see.
faster,
I
we
see.
had to rethink. So at Forefront, this is one of the things that I would love to share about how we are tackling that now is through the
Okay.
lens of racial equity. If you, another plug, go to Forefront's website and search for the Racial Equity Collective, you'll see on that we have a map, an asset map. It's called I Dream. You can go
Okay.
onto that and see what folks are doing in the areas of racial equity policy and programs, where they're located in Illinois, how they engage in that, what they do. And that lens allows us to see, again, our communities who are hit the hardest, suffering the longest, taking the longest to recover from things like a global health pandemic. It shifted how we worked in a way that we needed to be more connected over time, learning more in relationship with each other. Relationships matter. Like these
Yeah, they
things,
do.
they're not
Yeah,
just
they do.
transactional. You have to know that the communities outside of your community impacts your community. Like we're all connected and we have to really work on that over
Well, thank you for the correction because I guess I was not saying that people were not wanting to help. I saw what I saw was, we always do it this way type of
time.
organizations pause because we didn't
Yeah.
need to do it that way. I do remember you at the other organization and Evans Community Foundation, how quickly they responded. And I love that. And so I just know now the need really hasn't gone away
It
anywhere.
hasn't.
I love the
Mhm.
fact that you're talking about this racial equity map because if you look into the politicians, at least for those on the I don't want to bring politics into this, but I have to in the sense
Mhm.
that there are folks are trying to take race and all kinds of differentiation out of the game, and I just don't and say we're all the same, and we know that's not true. So
No.
I love that you have this. What kind of pushback do you have on on the use of it? Because I love that you have it, but are the
Mhm.
politicians paying attention to it? Or the policymakers, or is that the place where it should be played? It should be used.
You know what? They may be paying attention to it. And I actually hope they are. They should understand it's a point of education for us. Forefront is not highlighting what organizations should receive funding, right? We have intrinsically decided to focus our energy with any funding that we have on the communities that have been most impacted. That just happens to coordinate with communities of color.
Okay.
So you can write it any way you want. it's still a race issue. And so that's how we function. Politicians they're not, we don't accept government funding. We're not impacted by that. But having these conversations with my politicians, I would love it. All in the room, let's talk. Let's share the data that shows this, because that's where I'm going to go. Your opinion matters, but what really matters is the data that shows these
Mm-hmm.
communities have been left out for years and years and years, and the structural and oppression and racism that has happened over the years. So it, we haven't been impacted. We have colleagues that are afraid that they will get sued for the work that they're doing and the grant making that they're doing that centers around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're keeping an eye on that, keeping conversations going and engaging our legal partners to understand how to continue working so that our organizations are meeting their mission.
Wow. I mean, you're in the thick of it, because you're right. Folks are suing all over the place here. Um,
They are.
let's switch a little bit to the state of Illinois. I mean, because your organization is the whole state. How would you say Illinois is doing comparatively to some of the other states? And
You
I
know,
I don't know if it's a fair question or not, but I think I would love to see, kind of peer into your mind, what you think, because you play in a very interesting space.
so our makeup is really interesting. Our a very long state where everyone is focused on the nucleus that is Chicago. That's what's in the news. That's where the funding is. That's where the larger funders are. That's where the majority of our nonprofit organizations are. We have a grouping of our community foundation colleagues throughout the state that do work on some of the similar issues in Chicago, and also some rural issues such as transfer of wealth when younger folks move out of the state and don't continue family businesses. We want that. We want our children to go away, be great, but we're losing population. So comparatively, even though we are a blue state amongst the red, um,
Yeah.
we do good with fighting with each other. Chicago fights with lower. We just do it all the time. We can't help ourselves. It's Chicago against the world, or the rest of the state against Chicago. We do well fighting, and then sometimes we come to a point to say, you know what, it actually works better if we look at how we're accomplishing things in partnership. So food insecurity exists throughout this state. What
Mm-hmm.
other organizations in downstate or central Illinois can I work with on these issues? How can I better understand how it impacts all of us, how we're moving produce from Carbondale? I'm making things up now because I don't know this. How we're moving produce from Carbondale to a grocery store on the east side of Chicago. I mean, those type of things only happen if you're in community with folks learning about the issues of Illinois. As I said before, our community foundation colleagues are really good at this. Forefront hosts a CEO roundtable for our grant making colleagues. They're able to communicate with each other about what they're working on in their individual foundation, and how it could impact the rest of the state. We do the same on our nonprofit side. We have a nonprofit CEO roundtable when they're able to share what's happening throughout the state. So comparatively to other states, I think we just have similar challenges. The way our state is made up just keeps us further divided, and we have ample opportunity, I think, to connect, and we just need to take advantage of
And that's interesting. I love that you have the grant makers coming together with the think tank and the CEOs, and the non for profits coming together. Is there overlap? Because I would love to know what the grant makers are thinking, because they have the money. And in my small brain, I'm thinking, if you have the money, then you have the solution. But money doesn't
it.
always solve the problem. Um, and so here are just a couple of questions. The grant makers, do they always solve the problem correctly? Do they deploy the money, um, um, or are they struggling to find folks who can I know they have a perspective, but are they struggling to find the people to achieve their longer term or short term objectives?
A couple of questions there and a couple of ways of thinking about it. Grant making partners don't go into, well, majority of our grant making partners do not go into this isolated room that doesn't involve data or research and develop these grant guidelines to magically change the world. They engage the community before they get there. So they're working in partnership with either the current grantees, they're using data and research to say, or to get a better understanding of how the world exists and what are some of the things that need to be invested in to change it. They're coming together more around pooled funding and pooled ideas, and in partnership. So yes, we have that CEO roundtable as well as the nonprofit roundtable as well as the grant makers. We also have peer networks based on issues.
Hmm.
So you can be a member in any category to come to the table to talk about poverty or domestic violence, or we have a large grouping around education. And so that helps think about the work that happens, the policy that needs to be addressed, and the funding issues in those areas. And so they work together. What we try to do as best we can is make sure that any of our nonprofit colleagues who are sharing their expertise, sharing their knowledge, sharing their brain power that takes them away from their day-to-day work and their mission is being compensated for that.
Mm.
They are the experts. They have been dedicating their life to these things. We want that to be known, and we want them to know that we recognize their expertise. Our grant making colleagues are doing that. They recognize that we can't do this in isolation. They're not just throwing money out the door. Many of them are recognizing that all of the bureaucracy that we've had to go through, the paperwork, the reporting, that only serves us well if we're learning from it. Like,
Gotcha.
I don't want to give you a report that you're not going to read. And I don't want to check off I did it boxes when you don't know what I did it means in the long run. And so it gets better. It gets better with each opportunity to create a new grant program and develop new relationships.
And I bet do you feel like you're trying to herd cats sometimes inside those board meetings? Or is everybody
Mm.
in lockstep behind your vision, your approach for how the organization should move forward?
In my organization, I'm never hurting cats.
Gotcha.
I have My board is a board of really highly respected grant makers and nonprofit leaders across the state.
Yeah, I
And
saw that. Yeah.
they are highly supportive. They're highly expert. They're experts in their space and highly respectable of my background, and we work together. My staff the same. Never hurting cats. I've encouraged my team to come to the office as their full selves. I want all of who they are because that's why I chose them to be there, or that's why their supervisor chose them to be there. So give us their talents, give them all those things. The herding the cats sometimes comes in when we have a mandate from someplace else. So
Oh,
I'll just take the City of Chicago ethics ordinance.
okay.
That piece of legislation took us, it took us there. And my team worked really hard to make sure people were showing up to do witness slips and testimony. And we were actually in a meeting together, and my staff member was also plugged into the meeting at City Council, and we were all on edge together. So the herding of cats doesn't necessarily come internally, it comes with thinking about who externally can help make the decisions better.
Okay. And so what does the future look like for the state of Illinois in your mind? I mean, there's so many different directions. I mean, there's so much happening in the world right now. From we have a presidential race. Does the presidential race or the rhetoric impact your world at all?
No,
Okay, that's
no.
good to hear.
Unless, you know, I had the luxury one time of, while I was working at ECF, of declining a very, very, very small grant based on what someone said we could do with that grant, like what they didn't want us to do with that grant.
Oh wow.
And you had gone off the board, but I talked to the board about it, and I sent that person back their check. Here at Forefront, we're very clear. There is no intent to take us off course on our racial equity journey, and we are not receiving any funding to take us off course of our racial equity journey. We are not experts in racial equity, but we are in partnership with our colleagues who want to do that, because we believe at the end of that journey, when we get under all of the things that are stopping us from being equal, if you will, that race is there. So I don't have to contend with that. However, when it comes to working with some legislators in the state, I enjoy working with legislators on either side of the aisle, because ultimately what they want to know is how will their influence or how will their decision impact their community. That's an
Yes.
easy conversation to have, like just at the very basis of it.
Yeah,
How will your
absolutely.
decision impact your community? That is a very easy conversation to have when we're using data and we're talking about real life situations. The time that it takes to do that is a lot. You know, legislators, I bless them. I would not want to be them. I recognize the time that it takes and the journey that it takes, but it doesn't impact us in a way where we can't do our work. It
Gotcha.
gives us a better understanding of how people think when we're not in them with them all day. It's like if you're on Facebook, your algorithm on Facebook is everyone who thinks like you.
Yes, that's your
If
tribe.
you don't if you don't surround yourself by folks who don't think like you don't know that you need to start having different conversations.
Got it. And so, so the future looks. I mean, because there's so many things. I love that you guys are dealing with racial equity, and I'm thinking in my mind when the issues come up. But you just corrected me. Does abortion? Is that something that you guys deal with, or you don't deal with that part of it?
We deal with sharing the information. So when HB 40, when all that came down, we share the information. We keep space where we share the information on important changes to legislation that impacts the work that our members do. We do not move, well, we work on policy. We do not work on, voting for a particular person in that way, but we do share and we create conversations and collaborations around sharing how we're impacted by that policy.
Okay. Um, you know, as you move into this year, what are some of the big issues that you guys are going to be focused on?
So I spoke earlier about the Racial Equity Collective. We also, as a result, I think of what we learned during COVID, understood that a good amount of government dollars was pushed out and dropped on organizations that weren't ready for such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as a result of that, created a program to get organizations who were either currently or desired to receive government funding ready to do so, sustainable, teaching them how to make sure that they are financially prepared to receive those dollars, how to use them, how to sustain them. We don't want organizations going out of business. You know how our government funds, they want you to do the work and then they'll give you the money.
Right.
A lot of
Right.
organizations, right? A lot of organizations that are small on the ground, they don't have that in their corpus to fund something and potentially be reimbursed by our government. So we've been running that in partnership with some large funders, MacArthur Foundation, Chicago Community Trust, and some smaller folks that and in partnership with BDO and IFF. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the after set of that and how these organizations will be better prepared to receive large dollars from our government that could change the trajectory of their organization. And then the other thing is just, keeping on making those connections. We are one of, I believe, 6 philanthropy serving organizations that also have our population of our nonprofit organizations. And we believe that that's the best way to be in partnership with each other rather than
Okay.
only serving one or the other.
Okay. So I just
Mhm.
have a couple more questions, and
Okay.
I'm excited about this. This one is a little different. Has technology changed the landscape of nonprofit work at Forefront or in your world? Because you hear about AI, and
hmm
is it creeping down? Do you see where do you see it it fitting in, or is it too early to tell?
Well, Forefront hasn't used AI in that manner. We haven't been impacted by AI, but technology, absolutely. I mean, we're all mostly virtual. So we've had to think about how to be a fully hybrid organization rather than forcing everyone to come inside. And that works well for us because we want to engage folks around the state. It does us no good to travel to Carbondale and not have a room full of people, or be in Chicago and not have a room full of people. It's better to connect over technology. So we made use of all the Zooms, all the Teams, all the WebExes, the Owls. We have not needed to make use of AI in that way. We've been in contact with a colleague, TAG, which is technology, something grant makers. She's going to kill me because I didn't say the name of the organization right, but helping us think through how AI is important to our work and how we should maybe make sure we're mitigating against anything that could come up with AI. I will say cybersecurity has been much more. Yeah, we've had to pay more attention to cybersecurity over the last couple of years.
Have you been impacted by it?
Last year, we had this really weird thing happen where someone got into our system and they
Oh
charged
no.
our donors like a penny. It was several, like 1,000 people were charged a penny. It was so weird.
Setting them up.
It
Yeah.
was so weird. If you aren't paying attention and you got charged, a penny came up in your ledger and your bank statement, you're like, huh, that's weird. But it was Forefront. Forefront was charging people a penny. And so it forced us to shut down and redo some things and be aware of what the forces that be could do.
Okay. And so how do you maintain work-life balance? I mean, heavy is the head. This is what I say. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You got a kid, you have a husband. I'm sure if he's like me, I don't want to be second fiddle too long to my wife's job. So how do you have work-life balance? Plus, you need time for yourself. How do you,
Yeah. There's no balance, Keith. That's only blending. It's only blending. And it's a fun blend. Luckily, my husband is a very easygoing human being. And so folks know if they get me, they're gonna get Drennan, they're gonna get Brielle, they're gonna get my Aunt Gloria. We show up as an entourage all the time. So it's easier now. And the over the years, the more I've stated, my priority is this little girl that I don't want in a therapist's office 5 years from now, wondering why her mother didn't have enough time for her. So that's my priority. And if I'm not, the bad thing about it is if I'm not making it a priority, that's all I'm thinking about anyway, somewhere else. So I
okay,
can't give you my
okay,
full
okay.
attention. I can't, so once I get that squared away, which is again difficult today because it's a snow day, I can fully commit myself to those other things, and they understand that. The other balance is being very, very honest with my team and they know me well enough to know when I'm off my game.
Oh,
So I've had my CFO and my CPO say, "Are you okay? You need a minute?" I'm like,
mm,
"Thank you for recognizing that. I am going to go
mhm.
over here in the corner and do that." So being able to surround myself with people who respect family has been really good. I've only had one time in my career that I could tell that the person I was talking to expected me to be more than I was able to be in my role. And that made me so uncomfortable that I knew I never wanted to be in it again. And that person
Wow.
told me that she said, you knew what the job was when you signed up for it. And I was like, wow, it was hurtful. It was telling me that what I was telling her in the moment about how stressed I was didn't matter. And so I took that to heart to say, I never want to hear that again.
Mm,
Never
mm.
want to hear it
And
again.
and unfortunately, I've been the person that said that a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, only because no matter how tough or how many potholes we had to get it done.
Yeah.
But I can also tell you that as I've gotten older and I've experienced tragedy in my life, I know that you sometimes have to figure out a way to, which is why I asked about the whole life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am, um, one child less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I now can see that during the pandemic, people were hurting, still hurting, putting on a
Mm-hmm.
mask, and which is why I love the space that you're dealing in. And I no longer am that person that can be that well, I won't call it heartless, but
Mm-hmm.
that mission focused, because you gotta stop,
You do.
and help people to make it through.
You do. I unfortunately lost my mother. I was 17 when my mother passed at 52 years old. My father had passed a few years prior,
Oh
both
wow.
of,
Right.
in my opinion, health issues that could have been avoided: high blood pressure, hypertension, heart issues. My father had 3 heart attacks. So the life of it's not lost on me, the life of a Black woman and the things that she has to do. So I am committed to being here for my daughter's graduation, and if she so choose to get married and have children, I'm committed to stopping the generational curse of leaving this earth too early.
And so my final question is for those young folks or people who are interested in getting in this space.
Run,
Um,
run. No, just kidding. Okay.
any advice that you would give them how to look at it? Because when you entered it, it's very different than it was. So what
And that's
advice
the
would you
key.
give?
That's the key. The key is to the way that I entered the field of social work was because I was angry about something. Something pissed me off, and that happened to be an encounter with a little boy who had been abused. My family,
Mm.
the church that I was at, owned a daycare center, and I volunteered there. And this little boy, Cody, I remember his name, walked in with a broken hip and a broken leg due to his
Oh.
mother. That forever grabbed my heart. I knew I had to change the world. I was going to make the world better for all the children. That still stays with me though. I've done different things, but the thing that pissed me off has kept me going, engage in different ways throughout the state. And that works in my job, and that works outside of my job and my volunteer world. So whatever I tell people, when something pisses you off, that's what you go with. That's your passion. That'll keep you going. And how you show up in the different spaces throughout your life will be because of that. And they'll matter, but you'll still have that same passion, that same churn. So find the passion, find the thing that pisses you off, and follow that.
Well, thanks. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You are a delightful person, and I wish you nothing but success. Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.